Archangel Michael says, the moment your door echoes with his knock, the air will shift, and time will stand still. This isn't just any visit, it's the unraveling of years, secrets, and silence. You felt the tension building, but what's coming isn't just revelation, it's a reckoning. It starts quietly, just a shadow outside, a silhouette familiar yet haunting. You freeze, heart tight, because something in your spirit already knows, this is no casual stop. This is the conversation you were never supposed to hear. The truth was never meant to reach your ears. His voice, calm but trembling, slices through the air when you open the door. And in that very instant, something inside you begins to shake, not out of fear, but recognition. There's a knowing behind his eyes, and it's not just about you. He steps forward with something in his hand, not a weapon, not a gift, but something that carries weight. It's wrapped, folded, like it has been protected for too long. Whatever is inside, it's not just paper, it's power. Type Amen to get blessing 333. You step aside, letting him in, and the moment the door closes, you can feel heaven watching. Every step he takes is heavy with intention. He doesn't sit. He simply looks around the room, like recalling a memory you never shared with him. He finally speaks your name, not like a stranger, but like someone who's carried your pain in silence. He says your name like it's tied to a promise, and your legs almost give in. Because somehow, you know this moment was written long ago. He opens the folded note, hands it to you, and says, "This was hidden from you." Your fingers tremble as you take it, afraid of what truths might now be revealed. You haven't even read it, but your eyes are already full of tears. It's a letter, written in your mother's handwriting, dated 2 years before she passed. You gasp. How could he have this? Why did he keep it? Type Amen to get blessing 444. He explains that your mother gave it to him in trust, saying you'd only be ready when the signs aligned. He had promised her never to hand it over until this exact day, the day your enemies would believe they had won. And that day is today. You read the first line. Her words pierce deeper than any blade. My child, there are people in your life who are not who they pretend to be. She names names. Some you expected. One, you didn't. And your world begins to tilt. There's a family member you've trusted, loved, defended. But your mother's words speak of betrayal, secrets, and a hidden deal made behind your back. That person, they sold your inheritance for comfort and silence. Your hands drop the letter. Your knees hit the floor. The man kneels beside you, holding your shoulder, steadying your breath. He tells you he was there when the deal was made, but he didn't agree with it. Type Amen to get blessing 555. He says, I was silent, until today. Because heaven would not let me keep quiet anymore. His eyes shine with guilt, but also truth. You feel the weight of it all collapsing around you, lies, greed, betrayal. Suddenly, there's a second knock. Louder. Angrier. Someone followed him here. Someone who never thought you'd find out. He begs you not to open the door. He says, if you let them in before you've made a decision, they'll twist everything again. You freeze, breath caught. He whispers, your next move determines your future. You glance at the letter again. Your mother had signed off with a warning, trust only the one who brings you this letter. He tells you there's more. That the inheritance wasn't just money or land, it was authority. You were meant to be the one in charge, but someone wanted you silent, small, dependent. Type Amen to get blessing 666. He reveals something shocking, a contract with your forged signature. A legal trap, signed the day after your mother's funeral. It stripped you of your rights. And it was orchestrated by the person now banging at your door. You feel sick. The letter, the contract, the visit, none of it is coincidence. He tells you your mother foresaw this moment. That's why she wrote, when the lion roars, the wolf will tremble. The banging at the door grows violent. The man looks at you and says, do you want to face this with nothing, or everything? Your fingers wrap tightly around the letter and the contract. He pulls out a phone, plays a recording. It's your cousin's voice, bragging. Talking about how you'd never find out. How they burned the other letters. How they paid a lawyer in secret. Type Amen to get blessing 777. Your skin turns cold. You hear your own name, twisted in their mouth, laughing. We took everything, they're too soft to fight back. Your teeth clench. You've had enough. He shows you a second envelope. It holds the reversal papers, notarized, unsigned, your final chance. He says, you sign this now, and they lose everything they stole. You step toward the table. Pen in hand. But your heart is racing. Not from fear, from power. For the first time, you are not the one in the dark. You sign. As the ink settles, the knocking stops. Complete silence. No more pounding, no more shouting. Just peace, heavy and divine. Type Amen to get blessing 888. The man breathes a sigh of relief. He says, Archangel Michael stood with us today. You were never alone. You feel warmth, as if something has lifted off your chest. He tells you that your mother didn't just leave you with words. She left you with protection. There's one more document, a sealed directive that gives you control over the land, the accounts, and the house. He places it in your hands. This was hers. Now it's yours. You break down, overwhelmed, shaking, grateful. The knock on your door was not random. It was divine timing. This visit wasn't by chance, it was heaven's correction. Type Amen to get blessing 999. You ask him why now? Why today? He says, because today was the day your enemies made their final move. And it backfired. He walks to the door, opens it, but no one is there. Just silence, as if the storm passed. He turns back to you, smiling with calm and fire. He says, they will come back. But next time, you'll be ready. Next time, you'll have truth, strength, and legacy on your side. Before he leaves, he places a photo on your table, you and your mother. But there's something written behind it. You flip it over. Type Amen to get blessing 1010. It reads, "You were never meant to be ordinary. You were born to rise." And just like that, he disappears down the hallway, his footsteps echoing like a closing chapter. The contract you sign begins a ripple effect, accounts freeze, legal walls collapse, and their lies come crashing down. They panic, they scramble. But the light has already exposed their darkness. Calls start coming in. Apologies. Desperate explanations. You ignore them. You already forgave, but you won't forget. You change your locks. You change your will. You change your heart, no longer filled with fear, but fierce clarity. Type Amen to get blessing 1111. That night, you sleep for the first time in years without trembling. A weight has lifted. Because finally, the truth is in your hands. You dream of your mother, smiling, proud. She says nothing, but her eyes speak volumes. And in your dream, behind her stands Archangel Michael, holding a flaming sword. You wake up with peace. And with purpose. Because your name has been written in heaven's book again. The visit changed everything. And it was no coincidence. It was heaven's justice. Morning came with a strange stillness, as though the world outside already knew something had shifted. You rose not with heaviness, but with fire in your blood. Everything had changed, but not because you ran, because you finally faced it. The phone lit up with calls you didn't answer. Messages flooded in with lies dressed as concern. Each word from them felt rehearsed, desperate. You knew they were only trying now because they feared what was exposed. The man who visited you had left no trace behind, but his truth echoed louder than their noise. You weren't just warned, you were rescued. They had hidden behind smiles, family ties, and empty traditions. But now their masks were cracking under the light of truth. You were no longer chained to silence. Type Amen to get blessing 1212. Later that afternoon, you received a courier. A thick envelope with gold trimming, inside was confirmation from the attorney's office. Your inheritance had been restored in full. Land. Accounts. Even the family home that was taken from you without your knowledge. You owned it all again, not as revenge, but as divine restoration. A note was tucked inside from the legal assistant. It said, "We were waiting for this moment. We're glad you finally came forward." Your mother's final instructions were clear. Tears filled your eyes again. Because in the end, it was your mother's faith that had saved you. She had protected you even in death. Type Amen to get blessing 1313. That night, as the stars stared back in silence, another knock came. Softer. Timid. You opened the door and saw your cousin, the one named in the letter, trembling. She wasn't angry. She wasn't proud. She was exposed. She begged to talk. But you said nothing. You held up the letter. Her eyes widened, and she fell to her knees. She admitted it all. The pressure. The jealousy. The silent deals made behind your back while your mother was dying in the next room. Type Amen to get blessing 1414. You asked her one thing, why didn't you just speak the truth? She couldn't answer. She only cried, saying, because I thought you'd win everything. You realized something in that moment. It was never about money. It was about control. And they had tried to break your soul to keep it. But they failed. Not because you fought back with rage, but because you waited for heaven's timing. The man who came to your door didn't just deliver truth. He delivered liberation. He had once been part of the silence, but chose redemption. Type Amen to get blessing 1515. 2 days later, a letter arrived from an old woman. A neighbor you barely remembered. She wrote, I saw him leave your house. He used to walk with your mother every Thursday before her diagnosis. She said he was more than just a friend. He was her confidant. The only one who knew the full truth. Inside the envelope was a photograph. Your mother, holding a file with your name on it. And standing beside her, the man who had come to your door. You stared at the photo for a long time. Everything aligned. This was not just a coincidence. This was destiny folding back into your life. Type Amen to get blessing 1616. You framed that photo. Placed it on your wall where light hits every morning. A symbol of what had been hidden, and what had finally come to light. People began treating you differently. Those who once ignored your worth now praised your courage. But you saw through their performances. You didn't need their applause. What you needed was already inside you: peace, power, purpose, and the quiet approval from heaven. One night, the man called you. His voice was softer than before. He said, there's one more place I need to take you. Something your mother wanted you to see. Type Amen to get blessing 1717. You met him at an old garden behind the church your family had abandoned. He said your mother had buried something beneath the tree. A memory sealed in a time capsule. You both dug until your hands were raw. And then, the metal box appeared. Dusty. Heavy. Unopened for years. You lifted it with reverence. Inside were handwritten pages. Your mother's journal. Her real voice. Her tears in ink. You read until dawn. Pages filled with love, warnings, and instructions meant to guide you after her passing. And once again, her words pierced you open. Type Amen to get blessing 1818. She had foreseen the betrayal. She had watched the greed, the envy, the plans forming around your back. And she had prayed that truth would find you. You realized her death didn't mark the end. It marked a beginning. A legacy rising through ashes. The man stayed silent as you read. Then, before leaving, he said, your mother didn't choose many people to trust. But she trusted me with the one thing that mattered, you. You hugged him, not just for what he did, but for who he became. He was once part of the shadows, but now, he stood in the light. Type Amen to get blessing 1919. From that day on, everything changed. Not just your surroundings, but your soul. You walked differently. You smiled differently. You lived in truth now. You rebuilt what was broken. Not out of bitterness, but purpose. And every time someone asked about the change, you simply said, "A man came to my door." But deep down, you knew it wasn't just a man. It was a divine messenger. It was Archangel Michael's orchestration. A divine appointment, not an accident. And on the anniversary of your mother's passing, you lit a candle, not out of grief, but glory. Her truth had risen. Her daughter had too. Type Amen to get blessing 2020. Weeks passed, and the whispers died down. The ones who once gossiped and schemed no longer had power. Because your truth silenced their lies more than any argument ever could. Your cousin moved out of state. She left behind nothing but an empty promise to change. And though you wished her healing, you never wished her return. The man who came to your door sent one final package. It was small, wooden, and carved with an angel's wing. Inside, a key and a final note. The note read, "You've unlocked the truth, now unlock your new beginning." The address scribbled below was to a property you didn't even know existed. But it was in your name. Type Amen to get blessing 2121. You drove there the next morning. An hour outside the city, hidden behind quiet trees, was a cottage, untouched, sacred. Your name engraved on a gold plate by the door. Inside were things from your childhood. Toys. Clothes. A painting your mother once started but never finished. You cried like a child again, but this time it was holy. The man had found it, restored it, and held it until the moment was right. He had honored his word. He had delivered your destiny back into your hands. Archangel Michael says, sometimes God delays a blessing so the truth can be seen before the reward arrives. You realize this wasn't just restoration, this was divine timing. Type Amen to get blessing 2222. The cottage became your safe place, your second home. Every room held echoes of innocence you thought had been lost. But your past hadn't died, it had just waited. Each visit to that place reminded you, nothing stolen remains hidden forever. Not from heaven. Not from a mother who fought with angels. You planted flowers where the grass had grown wild. You filled the rooms with light again. You painted the last strokes of your mother's unfinished canvas. It became a symbol, not just of closure, but of healing. You hung it in the front room. So every person who entered saw what love looked like after pain. Type Amen to get blessing 2323. One day, while sorting through a drawer, you found an old tape recorder. You pressed play out of curiosity. Your mother's voice whispered, "If you're hearing this, my plan worked." You gasped and froze. Her voice felt like home, yet it stabbed through time. She continued, "You were always the strongest, even when you didn't see it." She named the people who tried to take from you. She named the man who came to your door, calling him "my last soldier." She said, "If he found you, you are safe." She left you with a final command: never hide your voice again. Speak, walk, and claim what is yours. And never doubt that you were chosen. Type Amen to get blessing 2424. That recording became your most sacred possession. You played it on days when doubt tried to creep back in. It always pushed darkness away. From the outside, no one would ever guess what you had endured. But within you, a kingdom had been rebuilt. And its walls were made of truth. People began asking you to speak, to share your story, your pain, your victory. You never gave them names. But you gave them courage. Because you knew others were still waiting for their knock. For their truth. For their divine interruption. You became the voice for those still trapped in silence. Type Amen to get blessing 2525. You once feared being alone. Now, solitude felt like protection. You didn't need everyone, you needed alignment. Then, out of the blue, you got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a feather pressed into the seal. It was from the man. It read, "My purpose is fulfilled. You no longer need me. But if ever the enemy rises again, remember this, heaven never forgets a warrior." You folded the letter with care. Stored it beside your mother's journal. You whispered a thank you to the skies. Type Amen to get blessing 2626. Time moved forward, but you did not forget. You just chose peace over revenge. You chose growth over bitterness. Those who betrayed you had to live with their own consequences. Not because you punished them, but because truth never returns void. Archangel Michael says, "The hands that tried to bury you underestimated the seeds heaven had planted. You had bloomed in secret, now the world would witness your strength. You stood in your truth, not just for yourself, but for your bloodline. You broke the curse. You shattered the silence." Type Amen to get blessing 2727. Years later, you visited your mother's grave. Not to cry, but to celebrate. You brought the photo, the one of her and the man at the door. You placed it on her stone. "We did it," you whispered. A breeze passed your cheek like a kiss from heaven. You knew she heard you. You knew she watched the whole battle unfold. And you knew she smiled when you didn't give up. Her last wish wasn't just for you to receive. It was for you to become. And that's what you did. You became the unshakable one. Type Amen to get blessing 2828. Your story, this entire journey, became the proof that heaven does interfere. That sometimes God allows a storm, so he can destroy the shelter built on lies. The man at the door wasn't just a messenger. He was the sword that sliced through generational darkness. He came with truth, and he left you with power. You never saw him again. But you didn't need to. Because now, you carry that same fire in your chest. Now when others come to your door, they're not there to deliver, they're there to be delivered. You became the miracle you once waited for. Type Amen to get blessing 2929. And one night, when the stars above blinked like eyes of angels, you had a dream. In it, your mother stood beside Archangel Michael. Behind them, a door. They opened it, and behind it was a garden, your garden, full of light, laughter, and truth. They said nothing. But you knew what it meant. You had restored what was stolen. You had reclaimed your name. You had stood your ground. And when you awoke, you looked in the mirror, and smiled. Because now, you weren't just the girl who survived. You were the one who answered the knock, and rewrote destiny. Type Amen to get blessing 3030. The dream stayed with you for days. You couldn't shake the image of the open door and the divine figures waiting beyond it. It wasn't just a vision, it was a calling. You started writing, documenting every moment from the day of the visit. Every page carried weight. Every paragraph was a scar transformed into a weapon. People read your words and found themselves within your story. It wasn't just your pain. It was theirs too. You had survived the unspoken, and now gave language to others who were voiceless. Invitations began pouring in, to speak, to guide, to lead. But you chose carefully. You no longer lived to prove anything to anyone. You now moved only in alignment. Type Amen to get blessing 3131. One day, a young woman knocked at your cottage door. Her eyes were full of silent storms. Her hands shook as she held out a sealed envelope. She whispered, "They said you could help me." You invited her in. You saw yourself in her. You didn't need her story to recognize the pain, you already knew. She unraveled slowly, like a forgotten letter. Her betrayal came from those who wore smiles, just like yours did. And in your presence, her truth began to break free. You told her what the man told you: this is not the end. This is the beginning. What tried to bury you has no idea what it just awakened. Type Amen to get blessing 3232. She wept in your arms. You held her the way no one held you back then. And something sacred passed between you, a healing only heaven could orchestrate. Archangel Michael says, when your wound becomes someone else's rescue, the angels rejoice. That day, the cycle of silence was broken again. You gave her your mother's journal to read. You saw the light return to her eyes. And when she left, she stood straighter, not yet healed, but no longer hopeless. It became clear, you weren't just rescued, you were anointed. You weren't just visited, you were chosen to continue the visitation for others. Type Amen to get blessing 3333. Soon, you created a space, not a church, not a building, but a sanctuary. A place for those knocked down by betrayal and silence to rise again. You called it, the garden beyond the door. And people came. Not in crowds, but in divine timing. Each one carried a secret that weighed more than words. And each one found light. Not because you were perfect, but because you were transparent. You didn't give them religion. You gave them restoration. Every person you welcomed reminded you of that first knock. The silence. The heaviness. The fear. And the moment it all began to break. Type Amen to get blessing 3434. One evening, while lighting candles at the garden, a gust of wind blew through, strong, but not cold. You looked up. You felt something near. A golden feather lay at your feet. Not from any bird. It shimmered as though heaven itself had placed it there. You picked it up, heart racing. And deep inside, you knew, he had returned. Maybe not in body, but in presence. The man who changed everything. You whispered his name in gratitude. And the sky responded with a crackle of thunderless lightning. You smiled. You were being watched from above. Type Amen to get blessing 3535. Years later, when the cottage was filled with books and stories and faces healed by truth, a journalist came to visit. He had heard whispers about you. He asked how it all began. You didn't tell him the whole thing, only that someone came to your door when everyone else turned their back. He asked what was in the letter. You didn't let him read it. Some truths are too sacred for media. Some miracles can't be explained, only lived. He left stunned, changed. And days later, your story reached people across the globe. But you didn't care for fame. You only cared for freedom. Type Amen to get blessing 3636. The people who once betrayed you? They still watched from afar. Some apologized. Some remained silent. But none could undo what heaven had rewritten. You had already forgiven them in your spirit. But trust? That stayed buried. Forgiveness was divine. Rebuilding was your choice. You no longer feared the past. You didn't dread the unknown. Because when you've walked through fire and emerged whole, no storm can break you. One final night, as you sat by the fireplace, a soft knock echoed once more. Gentle. Familiar. Your heart raced. Type Amen to get blessing 3737. You opened the door slowly. A teenage boy stood there, holding an old leather notebook. He said, "He told me to find you." You froze. The boy handed you the notebook and added, he said, "You would know what to do with it." Then he turned and walked away into the night. You opened it. Page after page was filled with details. Secrets. Names. Testimonies. It was the man's full confession, everything he witnessed, everything he couldn't say back then. Tears blurred your vision. The final page read, "I gave you what was yours. Now give them what they need. You are the door now." Type Amen to get blessing 3838. You clutched the notebook to your heart. You whispered into the air, "Thank you." You finally understood the full weight of your journey. It was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was divine. And helping others do the same. You stood in the doorway, the wind wrapping around you like armor. The same place where the story began, was now the place you sent others out with their new beginnings. And when people ask you how you knew to trust the man at the door, you say, "Because heaven knocked first." Type Amen to get blessing 3939.